Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. And today we're speaking with Judy O'Donnell. She's involved in visiting sacred sites and connecting with indigenous peoples. Thanks for coming in, Judy.
Thank you, Norm.
Before we get on to the fascinating area of sacred sites, can we just have a bit of a look at your own spiritual background?
Yeah.
How did it all start? Did you born a Christian, were you?
I was brought up, Mum was Presbyterian before we changed to Methodist when they merged. So I went to Sunday school and the normal
stuff,
Australian school things with religious instruction, etc. Then I went overseas, went to Europe and then went to Morocco and met a Muslim and ended up marrying in Morocco.
Right.
Lived over there for a couple of years and learnt a bit of Arabic because he took me out to his grandmother's who spoke no English, and so I had to learn.
Arabic, yes.
which was handy. And then we came back to Australia. I suppose I've always been connected with the indigenous people, more so Native Americans, Aboriginal. I always liked, books and films with them in them when I was small.
Yes.
And still do now.
So was at your primary school level where they were bringing students down from up north?
Yes. Our headmaster had a connection with Aboriginal, an Aboriginal community up in Arnhem Land, and so they used to bring children down that were billeted out in school holidays just for 2 or 3 weeks each year. So we didn't actually have any billeted to our home, but my friends did, so I got to hang out with them and just listen to their stories. But the other thing I noticed, which made me really start looking into Indigenous people of our own country, the Aboriginal, was the fact that they would get sick when they started eating our food, because these people were from living cultural lifestyles with their own bush tucker. And so, they'd eat the white flour and sugar and all the foods that we were living with and would be sick by the time they went home, which was interesting.
It was revealing, very revealing. What other things did you notice about the Indigenous children? What stood out about them?
I suppose they were shy, because to them this would have been completely different to be in, the situations that they were brought into. But it opened up for them, like you could see their eyes just looking around at things that we had that we take for granted. So I suppose that had a huge effect on me too, from that small age. That was in primary school, and then when I was in high school I travelled with another one of our teachers from high school. Used to take a group to either Uluru or to Perth and across the Nullarbor. Another year we went up the coast of New South Wales up to Queensland on school trips in the September holidays, and just seeing the difference of what we take for granted living in, well, I wasn't in Melbourne in the suburbs, but still, suburbia, compared to Indigenous communities. The ones that I've visited are still, even today, living in poverty and without proper amenities and things, which is a bit sad for a country that's not a third world country.
So that laid the seeds for a lot of your future activity.
Yeah.
But just coming back to your marriage, the Moroccan marriage, how did you find being in the Muslim culture with Islam?
It was in Morocco, so I suppose Morocco's not quite as strict as, say, Iran or some of the other, Saudi Arabia, or actually Malaysia too. We went to Malaysia, and even Mustafa was blown out how strict they were there compared to Morocco. But I just found that I read the Quran because it was a book he handed me that was translated into English, and it was the only book I could find back then. This is going back like 40 years ago. And I went, I'll read the Quran. And I must admit I was blown out how similar it was to the Bible the teachings were almost identical, but they just say that Muhammad came as a prophet after Jesus, and Mary is mentioned, all of the Moses, all of the Christian sacred people, prophets,
and
etc.
that tended to set up your spiritual perspective, didn't it?
Yeah, it just made me a little bit wiser to the fact that basically I think it says in the Bible that every country will have a prophet sent to send the message. And when I looked at all of the different religions that I have looked at, and that's not counting indigenous people, that's slightly different, but the actual religions, the major religions of the world, that their teachings are so similar. When you look at them, the essence of them is practically the same.
They certainly are. And so if I was to ask you what's your spiritual belief right now, what would be your answer?
Good question. I find that a really hard one, because I have had Muslims say you would make a great Muslim. I've had Jehovah's Witnesses say you'd make a great Jehovah's Witness. So I think I actually live to my ability a religious life, doing the right thing, doing unto others as I would have them do unto me, etc., without having a label of any particular religion.
Yes, yes.
But I've looked at Buddhism, which is not a religion but a way of life, and I love that too.
Yep.
So yeah.
So you've got an open heart relation to it.
And I'm happy with sitting down and talking to any religious person, totally open and happy to discuss, and probably agree with 90% of what they're talking.
Yes, yes. That's quite a good place for you to be with what you've turned out to be doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you've got how many kids?
Only one.
Only one.
Yep,
one.
from Morocco.
From Morocco.
Yep.
Okay. And so there was a bit of schooling type issues.
When I was at school, I think I was 14, and I said to Mum, I really don't want to learn this, what they were teaching us back, I'm going back nearly 45 something years now. I wanted to leave because I wasn't happy with what they were teaching me. I just kept saying, Mum, I don't need this in my life. I don't really need this in my head. And so when I was 15, I was allowed to leave school. And then when my daughter, many, many years later, I was putting her into school, and I was one of those mums that went down and supported and helped out with swimming or reading or whatever. And I started looking at the little pieces of paper that each student all brought home identical, and they had to colour in or fill out the answers, and realised that it hadn't really changed in all those years. And so I put an ad.
There's something that does change though, or doesn't change.
Yeah.
We always run out of time.
Oh.
We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. We're speaking with Judy O'Donnell, who's involved with visiting sacred sites and connection with indigenous peoples. Judy, when I interrupted you, you were in the process of saying that your daughter had gone to school and you found that things hadn't really changed since you were at school. They were being taught things which were in a box.
Yep.
What happened with that?
Well, I realised that, so I thought, okay, I can't put her through what I didn't like. So I put an ad in the local paper and said alternate school starting on the peninsula. I was down on the Mornington Peninsula, and I think we had about 13 people turned up to the first meeting, and we discussed what sort of school we would have, and we knew that there was Montessori that we'd looked at Steiner, we looked at homeschooling, and I thought Steiner was the most holistic, I suppose would be the word, that looked into a deep philosophical background of everything about bringing a child up, and so we decided to start a Steiner school. So,
can you give us a bit of an idea of what the Steiner framework's like? How does it work?
Probably the first thing would be the 7-year epoch, which I think we were talking earlier before we started recording about my thing with sevens. So he talks about the 7 years, the first 7 years being the physical, and so the belief in that system is that the physical body a child should be playing, climbing trees, touching things, getting to feel and touch in the physical body. Then they step into the mental, and that's not mental as in mental, but the mental body. And that's when children start saying, what's this, what's that, and they're asking and inquiring, and that's when you start bringing in writing and reading and arithmetic. So then the emotional body comes in around 14, which is when we all know,
Yes.
puberty hits and we go through the he doesn't love me, etc.
Yes,
that's when you should be learning the emotional part of life.
Right.
And then at 21, the old key to the door, that's going into the spiritual. So it's about the 7-year epochs, and it's not exactly at their birthday on the 7th. It's actually when the milk teeth drop is that period. So it can be 6, 7, 8, depending on the child. But then, the key to the door, the spiritual aspect steps in, and that's when you're meant to be whole through all systems, if we were brought up that way, and ready to go out into the world and learn the spiritual aspects.
Well, and I think recently they've added an extra 7 years onto that, and they're starting to acknowledge the fact that people are not actually even starting to become mature until they're 28, which is 7 years on 21, which is a little less than an accident, I'd suggest. So, all right, so how does that manifest itself the first 7 years? So from 0 to 7?
Yep, so they shouldn't actually be at school. They should be home with mum, in the family, playing in the sandpit, climbing trees and watching mum doing housework or dad building a fence or whatever's going on and doing physical things. Because if you put them in school, like I cringe sometimes when I see people saying, oh, my daughter's only 3 and she can read and she knows her alphabet and all that. And I go, oh, but what are you doing to her physical body? Because the organs are still, developing and that's what's meant to be happening. The physical body is meant to be adapting.
How old was your daughter when you started this? Was
she actually went into primary school at 6.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And that was when she did prep. And then when she went into grade 1, and that was when I got the realisation that I was going to put her through a system that I could see through that wasn't working. Well, it wasn't working for me. I think we all learn different ways too. There's visual and audio, different ways people learn too. So one system is not going to work. You're always going to have the ones that are bored, sitting there listening to the teacher when it's not their way of learning, which is a big problem in the schooling system now too. And the other thing I loved about Steiner was that everything was natural. There was no computers or mobile phones, nothing like that, and everything that they counted with was, say, shells or wooden things and all natural pieces of nature, which was really beautiful too, to have that.
So how long did you run that school for? How long did it go into?
That's a good question. I was probably involved for about 5 or 6 years altogether, but we did take a year out of that when Mustafa and I separated, her dad. He wanted to take her to Morocco, and I said, oh, yeah, that'd be great. So we went together, even though we'd separated. We ended up doing a trip around the world to all the sacred sites together and took Malika when she was 7 and then came back after that. So it took a year out, came back, and I was involved until she was nearly ready to go to high school. So.
Let's go back to we went around the world to the sacred sites. Was that the first, was that really where it broke through, this interest in sacred sites?
No, I'd been to Egypt and some of the sites of the UK before I'd even met Mustafa, so it goes back a long time, I think.
Yes.
Plus, I'd been to Uluru when I was a school kid on the school trip, so...
So we'll talk about sacred sites a lot in the next program. But another thing that you put down as having been involved in is LETS, which stands for
Local Energy Trading System.
There we go.
That was it was interesting. I'd read about LETS, which started in Canada originally, the first one on the planet. And I saw in our local paper that someone was starting a LETS over at Hastings, and I went, oh, great. So I went to the meeting and the lady was up there talking, and she said, and anyone that lives over on the other side of the peninsula, go and see Judy. She's starting one up there. And I was like, oh, great, who's Judy? And everyone came up to me and I'm like, I don't know enough about it. And she said, no, I'll help you. I've got all the info.
Yes.
And so I started up because I was a little bit of a rebel with systems, as I've already said about the school system. I also thought that about the banking system too. It was just like I'd looked into, I don't like to call it conspiracy theory, but a lot of people do, that, there's a group of, what would you call them, corporations trying to take over the world, etc. Villainous, and bankers were part of it.
That's right, yes.
And I just thought, well, anything that can helpers. Plus, I was a single mum by this stage too, of course, so it was a lot harder to be able to afford things that I wanted. And so I thought, well, the let system's a perfect way. So it was basically people trading goods and services without money needing to change hands.
Okay. So
and it worked amazingly.
Did it?
Absolutely amazingly. We would have meetings every week and people would bring their stuff, so it was like a big market stall. People would bring along foods and jams and pies and things they'd baked. People would sew things and make cards so we could do our Christmas and birthday shopping. We could buy food without money having to change hands.
That's amazing. But time changes hands and we're out of it. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. We're speaking with Judy O'Donnell, who's involved with visiting sacred sites and connection with indigenous peoples. And Judy, we were talking about lets. Now, that's a bit like bartering, isn't it? There's some parallel there?
It is a bartering system, but with bartering, which is thousands of years old, we've had farmers used to barter and we've still got tradies barter. You know, I'll do the electrical work for you if you do the plumbing for me on this building or whatever. With the let system, what I loved about it was that if, say, for instance, you had chooks and you had lots of eggs and you wanted to sell your eggs, and I was a hairdresser, for example, you might come to me for a haircut and I go, well, I don't really need your eggs because I've got my own chooks. So we would just write a cheque to the value of whatever, and you didn't have to spend it on that same person. You could then go out to the rest of the Let's community and spend your, well, we called ours gum nuts because I had a bit of a thing about snugglepot and cuddle pie, so we had to have some little trading name for our trading unit, so we called them gum nuts. And you didn't literally go and pick gum nuts off a tree, it was just a name for our currency. And it was actually a legal currency. We had, there was a group over in Tasmania that started up and practically the whole town joined the Let's system, even the petrol stations and stuff, so it was really working well. And so, of course, the taxation department went, how are we going to get these guys? We've got to jump on because we're not getting our tax out of this. And so they said, well, it is actually legal tender. If you want to come and get your taxes, we'll pay you in whatever they're trading, say gum nuts or whatever their trading names were. And so they had to accept it because it was legal tender in that town.
Oh, good heavens.
And so they had to spend it in that town then. So it actually is a really good way. And even though our let system has dropped and broken down because of just, you know, timing and I suppose the people that were running it were getting burnt out and went off to different places, moved away, etc. It's still, there's a lot of people that I run into that say that they still go and have their hair cut with Donna and they still go and get their this from that. And so, it's just made a beautiful community.
It is a community thing, isn't it?
It's a very good community.
Yes, absolutely.
And we had a huge one down there. I used to have other let systems ring me and say, how do you get so many people? And I go, I don't know, it just works. We've got a really nice lot of people down there that are involved in helping each other out.
Yes, and talking about being involved with people, the other thing that you have a note of is the fact that the Mornington Peninsula interfaith group, you've been involved with them. How did that happen?
I think originally they asked me, because I also do drumming, Native American drumming, and have full moon drumming, and people come and make their own drums with me. And they asked me if I would do a drumming session in a teepee at their festival, the first one they had down at Rye Foreshore, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll come along. And then they had a listening to the land walk, which was with an Aboriginal Lionel Louch, who's Archie Roach's nephew, and we would walk and he'd do a didgeridoo meditation and he'd show people bush tucker and bush medicines and things as we walked through different parts of the peninsula. And the first one that I went to, apparently there was heaps more people turned up because I'd said, oh, come to this when I heard about it. And so Hans, who was running it at the time, he's since left, but he said, so how did you all hear about it? And half the people were like, through Judy, through Judy, through Judy. And he said, I need to talk to you.
Judy the postman.
So he actually asked me to come and have a meeting with him, and he asked me to come onto the committee, and I went, oh, I'm really involved in so many things and I'm trying to cut back on what I'm involved in because I'm getting burnt out myself. And he talked me into coming because, well, for a start, he explained what the interfaith group was about.
Yes.
And what could I offer it. And I thought, well,
Yeah.
I'm not religious. Like I said before, I'm involved in lots of religions, but I won't take on any one. And he said, well, what will we call you? Will we call you a shaman or a witch? And I went, well, no, I don't think. If you want to get funding, don't use the word witch. Maybe an earth person or
Yes.
something. So I can't remember the name that they call me, but I represent the earth people, the indigenous people who are connected to Mother Earth.
Yes. Yes.
And so then we started organising festivals with Sandy, and I took that on because he was going to cut the festivals. And I said, you can't.
No.
People love festivals.
They
So,
do, yes.
yeah.
How were you accepted by the others in the group?
Fine.
Yes.
Fine. As I said, I can sit
yeah.
and talk with any. I don't put any religion down because I do see the benefits of all of the teachings of all the major religions and the smaller ones. You know, the smaller, the Brahma Kumaris, the Baha'i, anything I've read or people I've met from any of those. They're beautiful people. I suppose I see the beauty in nearly every person I meet anyway, so therefore they respond that way.
Yeah, the outcome of their gospels or their scriptures is the same. That's the point you're making.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And with the whole Mother Earth concept, how does that link into? Do you link to a higher power? How does that work?
I probably am most connected to Native American the longest since I was a little girl. I've loved Native American. If you believe in past life reincarnation, then I'm pretty sure I've been Native American for sure, because I've always loved, dream catchers and drums and all the stuff, the Native Americans' feathers and things. But I suppose they call it Great Spirit, which to me is the same name as God or goddess. When you look at the Celtic traditions, etc., it would be God, goddess. There's always the feminine and the masculine. Father Sky, Mother Earth.
Yep.
It's that balance of the male and female, the yin and yang, etc.
Does that concept roll over into the indigenous people of Australia?
Yes, big time. It does, yeah. They have the same, the connection to Mother Earth and the sky and the stars. There's a lot of the Dreamtime stories are all connected in with beings connected.
Yes.
Totally holistically.
Yes. What about the rainbow serpent? Is that something which has any repetition anywhere else? That concept of
yes,
of
it
creation?
is. There's the rainbow serpent. It's called in Australia, and then over in South America and Central America, there's Quetzalcoatl, the feathered plumed serpent.
Okay.
Which is, if you look at the male and female energy lines that go through our body, the meridians, it's also through Mother Earth.
Okay, so it ties across in that way.
Yep.
So we need to speak more about indigenous religion but sacred sites and their linking into that. So would you be able to do that next week? Be able to come back next week?
Yeah, be happy to.
Thank you very much, Judy.
Yeah.
You've been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week with Judy O'Donnell, and we'll be speaking about sacred sites. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.